Orange is the new black is where we dive in. Every episode we'll discuss, even the scenes that made us cuss. So follow me, join the spree. I try to space for 2 E's. Spoilers everywhere, so be warned. Super fans, please come on board. Susie's special line and all these ideas, because we make it everything truly as it is.
Hello and welcome to Yadda Space. I'm Yadda and I'm so glad you're here. This is a rewatch podcast for the Netflix TV show Orange is the New Black. That means that there may be spoilers about things that happen in the future episodes, so please be warned. This is definitely a spoiler zone. On today's episode of our Orange is the New Black rewatch, we will be discussing Season 1, Episode 11, titled Tall Men with Feelings. The IMDb synopsis for this episode says, grief looms over the prison as the inmates mourn a recent death. Dayanara, Nicky, and Red plot to end Mendez's career by tricking him into revealing his indiscretions. Larry gives a radio interview about Piper's experience in prison, and his comments cause conflict with some of Piper's closest allies. We will also be getting some more backstories from Piper and Alex. Constantine Macris is the director of this episode. He's best known for his work directing Orange as well as Law & Order, which, since so many of our Litchfield ladies have guest starred on Law & Order, I'm sure he's worked with many of them before. This is the first of 10 episodes that he has directed for Orange, so we have plenty more coming up, including some really big and important ones, so I'm really looking forward to seeing him again. Laura Morelli is the head writer of this episode, and we've already seen her work on the Whack Pack episode, which in my opinion was one of the iconic episodes of the series. She's best known for her work on 26 episodes of Orange, so we will definitely be seeing her again. And as I always say, I know that there's more than one person in a writer's room, so I would like to take this time to give a shout out to the entire writing team. Thank you all for writing such a great show. You guys told the stories that were not being told, and for that, we thank you. Before I get into what IMDb rated this episode, I just want to issue a note about last week's episode rating. Last week, I gave the episode Bora 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 an 8.2. But after working on my social media clips from last week's episode, I have decided that I need to rate it higher. I had such a good time picking those clips. They tickled me so much that I have to raise the rating to at least an 8.5 to match the IMDb rating. That episode had a lot of laughs and heart, so to me, it definitely deserves that adjustment. 8.5 for Bora Bora Bora. From me, anyways. But getting back to this week, episode 11, Tall Men with Feelings, IMDb rated this episode an 8.4, so it should also be a pretty good episode. At the end of this pod, I will give my personal rating for this episode, but as always, I encourage you guys to go ahead and write your episode ratings in the comments as well, so that we can get an idea of what we the people think is actually the rating on this episode. Okay, so let's get into it. So this episode opens up with Mendez cleaning out Tricia's bunk. If we remember from last week's episode, Tricia tragically passed away due to a drug overdose, which Mendez made to look like a purposeful unaliving. And so now this episode opens up with Mendez being the one who has to clean out her bunk. Tricia's prison family gathers around as Mendez callously throws all of her things into a box. So we have Sister Engels, Yoga Jones, Norma, Boo, Morello, and Nicky, all standing around watching Mendez while they're also mourning their friend. That is until Mendez attempts to go pack up Tricia's sweatshirt. That's when Nicky stops him, saying, "Don't fucking touch it." Mendez stops and turns to look at Nicky, noticing that Red is now there as well. Red tells Mendez, "We'll take care of it from here." So Red grabs Tricia's sweatshirt and starts to pack it up with tears in her eyes, because Tricia was one of Red's prison daughters, so she's suffering a huge loss here. Mendez doesn't seem to care though, because before he walks away, he says to Red menacingly, "This shit better be spotless when I get back." And then he walks away. Over in the storage closet, we have the Diaz and Bennett families helping Daya while she's throwing up. Daya's in there with her mom Aleida, and Bennett walks in as well to help. If we remember from last week's episode, Bennett does not want anyone to know that he is the father of this baby. So he tells Aleida and Daya, "I have a plan." His plan is to use his uncle's connection to the warden to get Daya furloughed to go visit her fake sick grandma. Furlough is when they allow the inmates to leave the prison for a short period of time, usually to deal with a death or something major in the family, something that they really can't miss. So Bennett wants to set it up so that her fake abuela will quote unquote die so that Daya can get furloughed to go to her fake grandma's quote unquote funeral. She gets pregnant there rather than getting pregnant while she was in prison by a guard. But as Bennett and Aleida are working out the details of this plan, Daya is lost. She says, okay, but like, what does this fake grandma have to do with the baby? So Aleida explains to Daya that when her pregnancy starts to show and they can't hide it anymore, they can tell everyone that, oops, she got pregnant while she was on furlough and not by a guard in the prison, which saves Bennett. Once Daya gets it, she's like, yo, that shit is smart. And Bennett looks so proud. He's like, thanks, with a big old smile on his face. Before Aleida busts his bubble saying, but it ain't never gonna work. Bennett insists, listen, we gotta try. In the meantime, just try to hide your puking. Good luck with that in the first trimester. Over at the phone banks, Piper is trying to call Larry again. He's still not answering, which transitions us to seeing what Larry's doing on the outside, which is showing up for his NPR interview, Urban Tales, with Maury Kind. We actually get to see Larry get Piper's phone call, look at it, and choose to ignore it. So nice, Larry. We know what mindset he's going into this interview with, and it's not a great one. Back at the prison, we're in the electrical workshop with Piper, and Nicky is telling Piper that she heard that her dude is going to be on the radio tomorrow. And Piper is shocked. She's like, what? Where did you hear that? Apparently, Lorna listens to NPR while she's driving the van, so that's how she found out and told Nicky. But Piper had no idea because she hasn't been able to get in touch with Larry for a week now. As they're talking about the interview, they're working in the electrical workshop, untangling Christmas lights. And Piper's getting frustrated, as Christmas lights can be very frustrating. And she's like, why hasn't anybody figured out a solution to this yet? Good question. The guard on duty in the workshop is Luschek, and he says, all right, Seinfeld, calm down. You know, because Seinfeld would be like, so what's the deal with Christmas lights? I mean, they're always getting tangled. All right, Seinfeld, calm down. Then Luschek goes on to say, are you in a hurry to hang yourself with it? Piper stands up saying, less than 24 hours and you're making a joke? Someone is dead. Exactly. What is wrong with you? But Luschek still shows no signs of caring. He turns and says to Piper, Jesus Christ, are you having your red dot special? Communists in your funhouse? Crimson Tide? I guess insinuating that she's hormonal because she's having her period right now, you know, minimizing her actual feelings. Exactly. Piper says, by all means, attribute my legitimate feelings of sadness to menses. Exactly. I think Luschek at the bare minimum is being extremely inconsiderate right now. Piper is stunned and asks Nicky if they're really not going to have a memorial for Tricia. And Nicky's like, of course not. The administration cares more about burying the story than her. So no honor for the dead, no time to mourn for the inmates who cared about her, nothing. The administration just wants the story of this death to go away so they can move on. But we know Piper, and she says, well, fuck that. Everybody deserves a funeral. I'm gonna organize something for her. Because of course Piper's going to. She's a doer. But Nicky's like, you barely knew her. What are you doing? Like, girl, you just got here. You're planning funerals now? Oh, man. In the next scene, we get our first visions of the psych ward in the prison. They have Tiffany sitting in a literal cage, asking her, have you ever seriously considered suicide? But since Tiffany blew off that question, the doctor continues and asks her if she's experienced any anxiety in the last 2 weeks. To which Tiffany gets annoyed, saying, of course I've experienced anxiety. Do you think this is an easy job? Having to heal the whole world with just these 10 fingers? It's a lot of pressure. So unfortunately, that response is not going to help her get out of psych. The doctor goes on and asks Tiffany if she has experienced any loss of appetite. But Tiffany, still annoyed, asks him, what does that have to do with anything? She goes on and says, you know, it's people like you that give America a bad name. You all go squawking around talking about guns being dangerous when all you want to do is shove pills down people's throats, when all they need is just a little bit of faith. Tiffany goes on and tells the doctor, I'm not crazy, I'm chosen. There's a difference. Now, if you'll just let me out of this cage, we can both get back to doing our jobs. Please? The doctor thinks that Tiffany is crazy, but Tiffany insists that the miracles are real and tells him that he needs to go ask the other girls. They'll tell him. She's really healing people. That's when Tiffany gets really upset and she tells him, I'm not having fucking hallucinations. I don't belong in here. Come on, I'm not a freaking animal. Get me out of here. Which truly, it is kind of crazy that they have her in this cage like she's some animal. The doctor is warning her that she needs to calm down or he will have to give her some sedatives. Tiffany's like, I don't need sedatives. Jesus has my back. But the doctor is not trying to hear that. He just walks out of the room, leaving Tiffany in the cage. Elsewhere in the prison, the guards are having a meeting and Natalie Figueroa, aka Fig, the warden's assistant, is leading the meeting. She's telling the guards an inmate is dead and a crippled delinquent was attacked. What happened yesterday was an epic fuck up, people. She tells the guards that they all better get on their knees tonight and pray that none of those kids' families sue the shit out of the DOC. That's when Bennett asks, is there going to be an investigation into Miller's death? You know, asking about Tricia. He tells Fig that the manual says that the FBI should be notified and other protocols, but Fig cuts him off saying this was a clear-cut suicide case. There's nothing to investigate. The body was cremated. May she rest in peace. So damn, they already cremated Tricia without even looking into how she passed? That sounds crazy. I wonder if they did that before they even told her family. Wow. It makes me think of other deaths that happened later on in the series and wondering what happened with their bodies. Man, that's cold. So Fig goes on to communicate to the guards that the warden wants them to communicate to the ladies that they care, that they have services to help them. And Healy interrupts her saying, you've got to be kidding me. How is this a good use of our time exactly? Damn, Healy, your literal job is counselor. Isn't this like your whole job? Healy completely disregards Fig talking about, listen, I've got real work to do as he gets up and tries to walk out of the meeting. And Fig is like, sit down. Unless you want me to tell the warden that you refuse to participate. Who the hell do you think you are, Healy? It's gotta be sexism with him, right? He does not respect women, clearly, which means he is in the wrong profession. So as Healy sits back down, the rest of the guards start to try to figure out the wording for this memo to the inmates offering their condolences. But C.O. Bell says insurance companies always tell you not to apologize when you're in an accident because it admits fault. So Mendez says, why don't we just say being locked up sucks, but that's no reason to hang yourself. Like, bro, I'm going to have to put a warning on this episode. I apologize for the suicide talk, and I hate that Mendez is joking about it here. It's really not something to joke about, and it's not something that I wish for any of you listening to me right now. No matter how rough today is, I hope you all remember that there's always a chance for a better day tomorrow. Stepping off of my soapbox, Fig says to Mendez, you think a dead prisoner is a joke? Something to make light of? Let me be clear. When these women are at Litchfield, they are in our care. And yesterday, we failed. A girl died because of us. All of us. So quit fucking around and show some goddamn humanity. You damn right, Fig. I don't know why it took me so long to become a fan of Fig all the way towards the end of the series in season 7, but she's clearly standing up for the women here, so I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you, Fig. Unlikely voice of reason. As they're leaving the guard meeting, Mendez asks Bennett to come out with him for a drink after work. And Bennett's like, nah, I kind of got plans. But Mendez insists, saying, don't be a pussy, join me for a drink. So Bennett agrees. Elsewhere in the prison, we see Aleida walking into the kitchen and she approaches Gina, asking her for some ginger gum, probably looking for something to settle Daya's stomach. Gina kind of blows her off, saying there's ginger ale and commissary. But Aleida persists and she's like, yeah, well, I tried that shit. It's not working. I have a really bad stomach bug. I need the ginger gum. That's when Gina stops, crosses her arms, and looks directly at Aleida, saying, what's my name? And Aleida is stumped. She's like, I don't know. Girl, how you asking for stuff and you don't even know her name? Gina says, exactly. All day long, it's get me this, get me that. There's what, 250 women in here? Is it that hard to know my name? I bet you know Red's name. We can't help you. But just as she says that, Red walks up behind her and kind of takes over the conversation. She apologizes for Gina, ironically saying that she's a sensitive little squirrel when she's on the rag. So while Luschek was over in electrical blaming Piper's emotions on her period, Red is literally doing the same thing to Gina over in the kitchen. Red then goes on to say to Aleida, your daughter is pregnant, yes? Aleida's like, what? No, there's this stomach thing going around. Red tells Aleida that Daya has not eaten in weeks and she's nauseous all the time, but she still has a glow on her skin. Aleida says, it's none of your business. Red's like, listen, you bring it into my kitchen, you make it my business. So Aleida gives in. She's like, okay, Sherlock. Yeah, you got it. But that's when Mendez comes up behind Aleida saying, you're out of bounds, inmate. Get the fuck out of here. So I guess those two mamas will have to continue that conversation later. Mendez walks right past Red into her freezer, grabs his box of contraband and one of the apples that Red just got finished cleaning before he gives her a menacing wink on his way out the door. Over in the library, Cindy is reading a newspaper and asking Poussey what's her sign. To which Poussey says, yo, my sign is get your ass up and help me with this shit. They're supposed to be putting the library books away. Cindy says, you don't want to know what the planets have in store for you? That's your business. Poussey says, man, the planets have jail in store for me and some more of the same tomorrow and the day after that. And then she says under her breath, Aries. Anyways, I'm an Aries. I don't pin Poussey for an Aries, but now that she says it, I guess I can see some Aries qualities in there somewhere. Cindy reads Poussey her horoscope, which says, it might be an excellent time to take a trip or see a new part of the world. Expand your horizons, dear Aries. And that's when Cindy grabs a book from the stack in front of her. The book is titled 1000 Places to See Before You Die. And she tells Poussey, yo, expand your horizons, boo. Man, I wish Poussey got to see those places, but we'll get there. Miss Claudette is sitting at another table in the library, and so Cindy asks her for her sign as well. Miss Claudette tells her that she's a Taurus, which that I can see. Even Cindy says, oh yeah, you a stubborn bull, all right. I'm married to a Taurus, and both of my brothers are Tauruses, so for better or worse, I know the Taurus sign very well. Cindy reads Miss Claudette's horoscope, and it says, the news that you've been waiting for might be delivered in a few days and will likely be positive. Gather your loved ones around in case you need extra support for the changes to come. And Poussey says, yo, your appeal. Maybe this has something to do with that. But Miss Claudette gathers her things and says, I don't think that's any of your business before she walks out of the library. I think she just doesn't want to get her hopes up. Once Miss Claudette leaves the library, Poussey asks Cindy if she really believes in all that horoscope stuff. Cindy says, sure do, but this paper is 8 months old. And Poussey grabs the paper like, what? Why was Cindy reading those horoscopes letting them think that they were current? That's messed up. Elsewhere in the prison, we see Piper sitting on the stage in the chapel. When the door opens up, she looks so excited to see who's coming in, but when she notices that it's Alex, her smile fades and she's like, aw. Girl, ain't that your girl? Alex says, okay, here's some advice. When a girl makes you come the way that I do, you should always act thrilled to see her. Valid. That's valid. Piper says, stop it, and gives her a sad hug. Alex says, okay, I see you're not in the mood to banter, so I withdraw my bant. Piper tells Alex that she asked some of the girls to come help her plan a memorial for Tricia, but nobody showed up, and so she's disappointed. So I guess that's who she was excited to see coming in the room. But no, nobody showed for that. Piper's like, I don't get it. I guess I'm the only one who cares if there's a funeral. To which Alex says, okay, that's not the most self-involved thing I've ever heard you say, but it's definitely up there. Alex goes on to tell Piper that you can't force people to mourn the way that you want them to, just because it'll make you feel better. But Piper insists that's not what she's doing. Alex asks Piper, why are you planning a memorial for a girl that you barely even knew? Piper says, we talked. I did know her. That's when Alex's trauma pops up and she's like, did you know her better than you knew my mom? Because if we remember, after Alex's mom died, Piper ghosted her, completely abandoning her while Alex was left to mourn her mom by herself. So clearly that still bothers Alex, and understandably so. Piper looks over at Alex and simply says, that's not fair. Alex says, none of it was fair. True. Alex's mom dying wasn't fair. Piper leaving Alex in her time of need wasn't fair. It's all a big mess. And that's basically what Alex says. She continues with, look, life gets messy sometimes. You've got to learn that you can't always fix it, which is true. That is something that Piper needs to learn. I think that's a good lesson for a lot of us. Life gets messy sometimes, and sometimes it's things out of our control. What is that line from AA? God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things that I can, and wisdom to know the difference. I think that that's something that Piper needs to work on, and something that many of us need to work on. There are so many things, especially right now, going on in the world that are just bigger than us. And so I think it's important for self-preservation to understand the things that are within our control to change, and to try to not get so stressed out about the things that we can't change. I think it's important for our mental health. That's when Suzanne walks onto the chapel stage. She's on the cleaning crew, and so she's there to clean. As Suzanne starts to unravel the cord for her buffering machine, she starts singing to herself. She's looking over at Piper and Alex saying, vanilla and vanilla, swirl, swirl. And Piper's like, I don't actually think it's a swirl if it's the same flavor. I guess good point. But I think I made that same joke a couple of episodes ago, totally forgetting that Suzanne says it here. So I'll let it slide. Suzanne says to Piper, if you were still my wife, I would tell you all the time how much I like your titties. Because girls like that. And then Suzanne looks directly at Alex saying, and that is a tip from me to you. Alex looks at Suzanne like, okay, thanks. Good tip. Not bad. And that leads us into a Piper and Alex flashback. It looks like we're in a time period while they're dating, and Piper is complaining that she feels like she's a bored housewife because Alex won't stop working to come hang out with her. Piper says to Alex, is this our life now? Annoyed and disappointed as she starts to walk away. But Alex stops her, saying, all right, let me take you out tonight. Anywhere you want to go. Piper looks pleased with that and says, okay. That's when Alex says, hey, would you be up for a trip to Istanbul this weekend? Piper says, yes, of course. She looks so excited that they're going to go on this trip together. Alex looks absolutely relieved, but then she says, babe, that's great. Thank you. I think you should be able to get there and back in a day, so you won't even have to stay overnight. I'm going to call and set up your ticket for you. And that's when Piper realizes this is not a romantic us trip. Alex is asking her to be a drug mule. Again. Piper says, oh my God, I thought you meant we were going to go on a vacation, like a couple, like normal people. Alex says to her, listen, I need you to do this. I wouldn't even ask if I had another option. Piper gets upset and says, I specifically told you that I would never do that again. And then she starts to spiral, saying, Jesus, I am so stupid. I really am. I'm just another drug mule to you. Then Alex gets upset, saying, you are such a naive asshole sometimes. And they're arguing. Piper says, I'm an asshole? Alex is like, I'm drowning right now, and you won't even consider helping me. Girl, what you consider help is illegal. Piper says, I am done. I can't do this anymore. I can't be with you. I'm going to go back to the States where I'm not your errand girl. And now Alex is spiraling, saying, I don't know how I didn't see this coming. And then she goes, you know what? I did see this coming years ago. Rule number 1, don't ever fall in love with a straight girl. Piper's like, is that what you think this is about? You know what? I guess that's easier than facing the fact that you are a drug dealer and it is ruining everything good in your life. Don't you dare push this on me. That's when Alex tells Piper, you knew exactly what you were getting into. I thought we were a team. Piper can't even respond to that because low-key, Alex is right. Piper did know up front what Alex did for a living, so she knowingly got involved with her after knowing what she did. That was a choice. Back at the prison, we're in a baby gate planning meeting. We're in the rec room with Daya, and she's sitting at a table with all of the prison moms, Aleida, Gloria, and Red. They're pretending to play Scrabble, but really they're in a meeting to figure out what to do about this baby gate situation. Daya's like, this is weird. What is going on? Why are we even here? The prison moms are quiet. And then Gloria says, you gotta fuck porn stash. Like, I don't know how to make that sound better, but that's what you gotta do. Red tells Daya, if you want to keep your baby and Bennett, this is the only way. Otherwise, you don't get both. And Aleida explains the plan to Daya in detail. She tells her, you just gotta get him to fuck you. Then you go to Caputo and you tell him that Pornstache raped you. You got the proof. And Red says, the proof is in the pudding, as they say. Gloria tells Daya that Bennett's furlough plan is never going to happen. Girls in here miss their own mother's funerals. The administration does not care. And that's true. We'll hear later about how Poussey didn't get to go to her mom's funeral, which I think is absolutely disgusting to have any of these women miss their mother's funerals. How heartbreaking. But Daya doesn't care. She says she will not cheat on John. She loves him. But Red says exactly, and that's why this is your only option. Red continues and says, we've all known girls who are in your position, and we know what happens to them. They get punished. They get sent to SHU or transferred to Max. And when it comes out that Bennett is the father, he'll be arrested and convicted as a sex offender, and he'll go to prison too. Red tells Daya, this is bigger than you. Every decision you make now affects your family. Welcome to motherhood. That's a true damn story. Daya says, well, even if I did it, and I'm not saying that I will, but even if I did, like, how would I get him to do it? Like, how would I get him to sleep with me? And so Aleida says to her, well, you're good at getting guys to sleep with you, right? Like, figure it out. Throw on that charm and get it done. Over in Tricia's bunk, her prison family is going through her things. Come to find out, Boo is going to save a few of Tricia's things for her girlfriend Mercy, the one that got out earlier in the series. Apparently, Boo's still been in touch with her, so she let her know what happened to Tricia, and she's going to save a few things for her, which I think is thoughtful. I always thought it was just Sophia with the running joke about Danita, the other hairdresser, who is horrible apparently, but we never meet her. But no, apparently other people take part in this joke as well, because Morello says, remember when Danita tried to do Tricia's cornrows? And they all laugh. Boo saying, yeah, even Black Cindy couldn't fix that shit. Damn, Danita, everybody's crapping on you, girl. That's when Chang comes over with a giant bag full of oranges, and she gives it to Norma, saying, you eat, before she walks away. And Morello says, thank you. So this is a prison tradition where if a prison family is suffering a loss and in mourning, the other groups of the prison usually show them some sympathy, and they usually bring them some sort of things, like the oranges here we're seeing Chang give to Norma. Very thoughtful, very demure. They love to call the inmates the animals, but look at how kind they are to each other. Gloria, Maritza, and Flocka come in with some food for Tricia's prison family. Flocka even offers a couple of nice words, saying, I always thought that Tricia seemed nice. I mean, I never talked to her much or nothing, but she had a good vibe. She did. She did have a good vibe. And Gloria says, I'm really sorry for your loss. Poussey and Cindy come through as well. Poussey says, I thought y'all could use some comfort food, as they dump a whole bunch of junk food onto the bed. Poussey compliments Tricia's hair, saying that she pulled off those cornrows pretty nice. And Cindy adds, well, for a white girl. That's when Poussey hands Nicky what looks like an empty bag of chips. But when she opens it up, she notices that Poussey put a whole bag of homemade prison hooch in there. And Poussey tells Boo, you gotta pour one out for her, right? Boo gives Poussey a pound and says, thanks, son. Very kind. And as we all know, Poussey is the best hooch maker in the prison at this time, so the ladies are very excited. In the next scene, we are with Larry at the NPR interview when the NPR host Maury Kind asks Larry about his prison visits with Piper. Larry says that Piper usually catches him up on all the latest prison gossip, which he calls highly entertaining. And so Maury's like, really? Can you share some of your favorite stories? And so Larry starts. He says, oh man, well, okay. I think my favorite is one of the first. And then that scene cuts. We don't get to hear the rest of the story, but we will. We will get there. When that scene cuts, we're back at the prison and we're watching Suzanne buffing the floors. As she's working, Piper comes to walk down the hallway and she completely busts her ass. She falls on the floor so hard. Suzanne comes over to her like, oh my gosh, Dandelion, are you okay? And Piper's like, no touching, I'm fine. Like, don't get too close. I'm good. Suzanne's like, I'm so sorry about that. We used to have a sign that said, caution, wet floor. You know, it really let people know what was going on. I bet it did, Suzanne. I don't know why they don't have it anymore. That's when Piper says, Suzanne, do you think that you can help me up? And so Suzanne helps Piper up, but she seems to be feeling really guilty about this because she's saying, this is my fault. This is my fault. As she starts hitting herself in the head, as she does sometimes. Piper turns to her and she's like, no. Please don't do that. Don't do that. It's okay. And so Suzanne stops, but she tells Piper, I'm going to make sure you get home okay. Suzanne assures Piper, no weird stuff. Just want to make sure you get back safe. Piper says thanks. And Suzanne grabs her by the arm as she gets ready to walk her back to her bunk. Piper stops and looks at Suzanne saying, you know this doesn't mean I'm your wife, right? Suzanne kind of scoffs saying, no, I'm in much more of a loving being single phase anyway. I don't want to be tied down. You feel me? And Piper says, oh, I feel you. When they get back to her bunk, Piper thanks Suzanne and she asks her to help her get situated. But as Suzanne comes into her dorm area, Piper stops her and says, wait, you're not going to pee, are you? You know, like the last time Suzanne was at Piper's bunk area. But Suzanne says no. When I get angry, sometimes I can't control myself. But that's why I go to loony jail sometimes. Psych. Because I got to work on self-control. But I can come back up here when I'm in control because mommy and daddy and the lawyer, they have an agreement with the warden. Suzanne explains that she likes it up here at camp. You know, better than Psych for sure. She explains to Piper that she just has to use the signal. And Piper's like, signal? What signal? That's when Suzanne does that motion with her fingers in her eyes. You know that motion when you're like, we see each other? You know, when you motion from your eyes to somebody else's eyes. Suzanne explains that that's the signal that she uses to help the guards know that things are cool and she's all right. She's not out of control. That's when Piper asks Suzanne if Psych is worse than the shoe. Suzanne gets a really serious look in her face and says, way worse, scary. It's bold, cold, old, real bad. I wouldn't wish it on the worst gremlin. And Piper's like, but don't they give you a therapist? That's gotta be good, right? Suzanne's like, nope. I mean, they give me medication and make me calm, but that just makes me sleepy. And sometimes when I'm real upset, they tie me down like a balloon so I don't float away. Piper's like, that sounds horrible. It really does. Inhumane, actually. That's when Suzanne explains nobody comes back from Psych except me. Suzanne continues and says, usually once you go to Psych, you get lost in Psych. Suzanne says, it's like that place with the 3 corners in the ocean. And Piper's like, oh, the Bermuda Triangle. Suzanne's like, exactly. We should play charades sometime, Dandelion. We'd make great partners, not wives, just partners. As she does her little eye signal thing. Like, we're cool. I'm not trying to be your wife, just partners. Before Suzanne leaves Piper's area, she says, wait, can I ask you a quick question? And Piper's like, yeah, of course. And so Suzanne says to Piper, how come everyone calls me Crazy Eyes? Like, she just doesn't get it. She truly and honestly does not understand. She looks like a little girl, like a little 8-year-old asking her teacher why the other kids in the class don't like her. She looks really sad. She looks genuinely confused. And Piper looks kind of heartbroken for her, but she doesn't answer. She probably doesn't know what to say. Back in Psych, we see Tiffany literally strapped down to her bed. She's got these giant leather straps on her ankles and wrists, and she looks like she's just waking up from being sedated, completely disoriented to where she is or even how she got strapped down. And so, of course, she starts to panic. As she's screaming, the door to her room opens up and we see Blanca being escorted past her room by a guard. Because if we remember, she was sent to Psych a few weeks ago because they thought that she was talking to the devil. And Tiffany's here because they think that she thinks she's hearing the word of God. When Tiffany's doctor enters the room, he tells someone that he needs another 5 milligrams of generic Valium for Doggett. So no, they're not helping her. They're simply trying to keep her calm and sedated. Tiffany is telling the doctor that she's not crazy, she does not need any more medication, but nobody's listening to her. The nurse simply says, if you're not crazy, you wouldn't have to work so hard to convince everyone that you're sane, as she proceeds to stick Tiffany with the needle, administering the medicine. Back in Tricia's bunk with her prison family, we see that they've made a cardboard replica of Tricia and put her in Tricia's sweatshirt. They've clearly been drinking Pousse's hooch, and Morello takes another big swig as she says to Tricia, may she rest in peace. When Morello passes the hooch to Boo, she takes it, gets up, walks over to the replica of Tricia, and pours some out for the homie. The girls are mad though, because like, why are you wasting the hooch? But Boo says, oh, fuck off. I gotta pour one out for our girl, okay? Piper walks up and joins them saying, so this is what you all decided to do instead of coming to my memorial? Get drunk? And Sister Engel says, well, which looks like more fun? Good point. Piper says, good point, nun. Sister Ingalls is a bad nun. Piper takes a swig of the prison hooch and she says, why is having a drink so cathartic sometimes? Boo says, booze help you process, at least where I come from. Piper says, well, my family just yelled at each other when they drank and then pretended like nothing happened. All of a sudden, Tricia's replica falls, which gives a visual of it almost looking like she's been hung again, which is extremely triggering for everyone. Norma quickly gets up and fixes it. Alex notices that Nicky's being extra quiet today. Morello says it's been a long day, and Nicky does look messed up. You know, Nicky and Tricia were like prison sisters, and they both struggled with addiction, so this hits Nicky really close to home. Boo is going through Tricia's book of debts until she says to Yoga Jones, how's that for karma? Tricia was good, better than any of us, and too fucking good for this fucking place. To which Nicky says, well, fuck that. We all are. And so Boo raises the hooch and says, to Trish. And they all say in unison, to Trish. So that transitions us into another scene with alcohol. Across town at a bar, we have Mendez and Bennett about to take a shot. Mendez tries to get Bennett to take a shot with him, but he says, no thanks, I'm driving. Mendez takes his shot as well as Bennett's and says, well, suit yourself. Mendez is clearly drunk and he's rambling very offensively about what happened to Tricia at the prison. And then eventually he says to Bennett, these fucking bitches look at me like I'm some goddamn piece of meat, you know? But I'm a human being, man. I'm a person, you know? With feelings and emotions. Does anybody ever ask me how my day is going? No. And Mendez goes on saying, we practically live with these girls. We know everything about them. Do they ever for a second think about our life outside of work? It's like we cease to exist outside of those fucking walls. Mendez tells Bennett, I'm sitting here, right? I exist. They think I'm so tall that my feelings don't get hurt. And he goes to grab a cigarette. But Bennett grabs the cigarette from him and says, you are tall, buddy. Come on, I'll drive you home. Like you've had too much. Let's get out of here. Mendez stands up, downs his beer, and gives Bennett a big old drunken hug. I guess Mendez just needed to vent. I low-key want to feel bad for him here, but I can't because he's a horrible person who does horrible things to people. Maybe if he had somebody to talk to outside of work, he would feel like somebody actually cared for him. Maybe he wouldn't be such a horrible person. I don't know. What do you guys think? Do you feel bad for Mendez? I don't. I can't. Back at the prison, we see Piper with her head down on the cafeteria table. It looks like she's got a little bit of a hooch hangover. When Miss Claudette comes walking past Piper, she manages to lift up her head and say with a smile, you're looking very nice today. And Miss Claudette says, better than you at least, as Piper deals with her hangover. Miss Claudette is off to have a visit with Baptiste, and so that's why she's looking extra nice today. Piper tells her, well, don't forget, Larry's interview is at 11 a.m. And Miss Claudette says earnestly, I wouldn't miss it. As Miss Claudette's walking away, Alex says to Piper, wow, you two are like real butt buddies these days. Yeah, they've come a long way. But that's when Piper notices Leanne sitting alone in the cafeteria. And so Piper says to Alex, what do you think about that thing Big Boo said last night about Tricia's karma? Like what if it's not bullshit? Piper tells Alex, I don't think that Pennsatucky deserves to be in Psych. Alex says, you're just drunk and emotional. She is exactly where she belongs. We basically performed a public service. Piper says, it's pretty horrible, Alex. And Alex is like, but you thought it was hilarious. Piper explains, that was before I talked to Suzanne about what Psych was like. And Alex is like, who's Suzanne? Piper's like, Crazy Eyes. Because at this point, most of the women in the prison know her as Crazy Eyes. They don't even acknowledge her as a person, as Suzanne. Alex says to Piper, are you cheating on me and Larry with Crazy Eyes? Because there is not room for the four of us. Piper's like, shut up, this is not funny. Suzanne said that Psych is worse than Shoe. Piper continues and tells Alex, you really should not have started that whole gaslighting thing. And Alex is like, whoa, what is with the blaming? You sent her into that bathroom, so do not project your conscience onto me. And so Piper's like, you know what? You're absolutely right. I'm going to go to Caputo's office and I'm going to tell him that it was my fault and that he should let her out. Piper tells Alex, I am so tired of running away from my shit. You said it yesterday. I compartmentalize everything to make myself feel better. I mean, I'm having an affair with you, and we did not play a prank on Pennsatucky. We were mean, and I cannot let her stay in Psych. I can't. That's when Alex tells Piper, I would like to stress that I think this is truly fucking stupid. It was me who started this whole thing. Piper says, then I'll take this one for the both of us, as she gets up and walks away, presumably to go talk to Caputo, I guess. And so that transitions us back into another Piper and Alex backstory, and it looks like it's about the same time period where we last saw them. Piper's looking frantically for her passport because she's about to miss her flight back to America, but Alex is sitting on the side of the bed, absolutely stoic, just staring into space with her eyes watering, looking like she could just crumble in any second. Eventually, she tells Piper, my mom died. Alex's aunt called her that morning and told her. Piper just hugs her and says, I'm so sorry. Alex tells Piper, my first instinct was to call her and talk about it, which is about to trigger my third cry of the podcast, because I can definitely relate to Alex in that way. I also lost my mom. Jeez, I don't want to sound like I'm crying. But I also lost my mom recently, or semi-recently. It still feels like yesterday to me. And yeah, like Alex, I lost my mom in a really sudden and unexpected way also. And yes, my first instinct the day that I found out that my mom died, and so many of the days that have followed, my first instinct also is to want to call my mom and talk to her about it. I remember sharing with someone close to me that this was the first death that I had to deal with without her. And I think that in itself makes it hard. So I can definitely relate to Alex in this scene. Alex tells Piper that she thinks that her mom had an aneurysm, but she says, to be honest, she doesn't really know because her aunt said so many things that she can't even remember them all right now, which also is very relatable when you get news like that. It's all a blur. It's just a blur. To Piper's credit, she asks Alex, what can she do? How can she help? But Alex is so scattered. She's like, I don't know. I need to fly home. I need to plan the funeral. There's nobody else to do it. You know, she is just spiraling about all the things that she has to do and kind of running on automatic. Alex says to Piper, will you see if you can find us 2 seats on a flight today? But that's when Piper says, Al, I can't go with you. I'm so sorry about your mom, but this doesn't change anything. And so Alex is holding back tears and saying to Piper, you're still leaving right now? My mother just died. I can't fucking believe you. But Piper doubles down and says, I can't be your girlfriend anymore. Alex says, yeah, and apparently not even my friend. Jesus, that is, I mean, I hear you, Piper, standing on business, I guess, but this is a horrible time to leave her. I don't think that was the right choice. I mean, even if Piper didn't want to be Alex's girlfriend anymore, like Alex said, she could have still been her friend in this moment. She could have still traveled back with her and kind of helped her through this thing with her mom. To literally flat out leave her right now in this moment, I'm sorry. Had that been me, I would never speak to her again. In 2020 and 2021, I lost a lot of family members, not just my mom. I lost my grandfather, who was more like a father to me. And then 5 days later, I lost my mother. 8 months after that, just before Christmas, I lost my grandmother, my mom's mom, who practically raised me alongside of her. And then that next summer, I lost a cousin of mine who was raised alongside of me more like a sister. To say that these last few years have been extremely hard for me would be an extreme understatement. Grief taught me a lot, especially when it comes to other people. Unfortunately, I have found it to be true that grief can show you all kinds of sides of people, and oftentimes it brings out not the best side of people. Family and friends, those closest to us, unfortunately, sometimes they will show us a horrible side of themselves during that time. So it's not really shocking to me that Piper is leaving Alex in this moment, because people can be such inconsiderate and insensitive assholes at that time. But it is disappointing to see, and my heart really hurts for Alex here. I did not expect a Piper and Alex backstory scene to get me in my feelings like this, but here we are. Alex, The cause of my third cry on the podcast and a little bit of oversharing. I'm sure there'll be many more cries, but that's number 3. Anyways, enough of my emotional breakdown. Back in the backstory scene, Alex finally lets Piper know where her passport is. And Piper's like, you hid it? But all Alex can say is, please don't leave. Not now. I mean, she's practically crying and definitely begging, which is definitely out of character for Alex. She really needs Piper right now. But Piper is cold as ice, turns her back on Alex, grabs her suitcase, and walks away. Damn. Back at the prison, we see Daya and Bennett walking over to their spot in the yard. Daya asked Bennett if he's heard back from the warden yet, and he's like, yeah, no, and actually I think this is going to take a little bit longer than I thought. Bennett is starting to freak out a little bit. He's like, it's not just my job, it's my whole life. I could be arrested for this. I don't know how we're going to fix this. Daya tells him it'll be okay. We'll figure something out. And so Daya and Bennett's love theme starts playing in the background as Daya says to him, would you have liked me if we would have met outside in the real world? And he tells her, yeah, of course. Bennett says, I would have bought you a drink, chatted you up. Daya's like, I don't even think we would have been at the same club. Probably not. But Bennett says, who knows? You know, I ended up in a skeezy dive bar with Mendez last night. Never thought I'd be in a place like that. Bennett tells Daya how wasted Mendez was and how hilarious it was. That's when he shares Mendez's vent from the night before with Daya, telling her that Mendez went on this whole rant about how women treat him like meat and how nobody ever asks him how he's doing. Bennett says, who knew he was such a delicate flower? Hey, Mendez is allowed to have feelings. That's when Bennett takes a second to look around before he risks it all and gives Daya a big old juicy kiss. Like, y'all know you're outside, right? People can see you, I'm sure. Elsewhere in the prison, we see Piper knocking on Caputo's door and he's like, what do you need, Chapman? Piper tells Caputo, I need to talk to you about Tiffany Doggett. But he says, we took care of her. She won't be a problem anymore. Piper continues and says, it wasn't her fault. It was mine, and I would like to fill out a report, officially. Caputo lifts up his glasses. His eyes are bulging wide as he sits back in his chair like, well, I guess so. If you insist, by all means, have a seat. That scene cuts, and the next thing that we see is Daya scheming. She has her coat in her hand, so she probably just came in from being outside with Bennett. When she walks over to the guard bubble, Mendez is in there saying, what the fuck are you doing? You are out of bounds. Get back behind the line immediately, inmate. And so she plays this whole little shy girl act like, oh, I'm so sorry. You know, I just wanted to talk. Is that okay? You must get so bored in here. And so Mendez says, it's not stimulating. No. And so Daya continues to inquire about Mendez, asking, so do you like other posts more than the bubble? Mendez opens up to Daya and tells her that the cafeteria is his favorite. There's more to do there and it keeps him busy. He says he hates intake because the goddamn ID machine is always broken. Which is pretty funny if you remember in episode 1 when Piper comes in and he can't even work the machine. He chuckles to himself and then he looks up at her asking, why? Daya says, oh, nothing. Just wondering about your day. Mendez takes a beat like, okay, that's weird, but I like it. So he continues saying, well, it's important to stay occupied. That's why I work on these brain exercises. You know, with a job like this, you gotta stay sharp, stay on top of your game. You always gotta stay a step ahead. Be quick like a snake. Oh, Mendez, how ironic when she is literally about 5 steps ahead of you right now. It looks like Daya has taken the little bit of information that Bennett gave about Mendez from last night and is actively using it to soften Mendez around her. And it looks like it's working. Despite his desire to stay a step ahead, he has no clue. And so Mendez gets comfortable with Daya as he starts rambling about some conspiracy theory about Sudoku puzzles. And Daya's standing there in the doorway nodding along like, oh yes, this is so very interesting. Wow. Yes, you are a very interesting person. I'm enjoying my time talking to you. She's doing a good job and he's buying every bit of it. Over in the visitation room, Miss Claudette is walking in to greet Baptiste. They hug and he tells her that she's glowing. Miss Claudette says, am I? She ain't mad at the compliment. As they sit down, Miss Claudette shares that she thinks she's going to be hearing about her appeal soon. To which Baptiste says, well, where do you want to go? On your first night out, where should we go? He tells her, you must believe, and it will happen. Okay, Baptiste with the law of attraction. Ask, believe, receive, baby. So Miss Claudette gives herself permission to believe. She starts telling Baptiste about a little Italian place that they used to go to. Miss Claudette tells him that that's where she wants to go. He's like, great. And after that, she says, anywhere. With you. Aw, look at these golden lovebirds. That scene cuts and we see Daya coming into the kitchen to speak to Red. But when Daya notices that Nicky is in the room with Red tells her, don't worry, she's family. Like, we can talk around her. When Daya comes in, she tells Red, I'll do it. I've got it all set up. Talking about sleeping with Mendez. Red says, you're sure? And Daya's like, yeah. So Red continues with the gritty details, telling Daya that she didn't want to be this graphic in front of her mother, but, you know, he does need to. And Nicky finishes her statement saying, come inside you. And Red continues with, or on you. They need some evidence that this has happened to show Caputo. Red tells Daya that after she's done, she needs to go straight to the medic's office. Tell him that you've been raped and have him do an exam immediately. When that scene cuts, we see Piper walking confidently over to Alex's bunk. And Alex is like, well, you're not in the shoe. Piper's like, nope. Janitorial duty, night shift for 2 weeks. So that was the punishment that Caputo gave her for setting Tiffany up. And so Alex invites Piper to come lay with her on her bed and be her little spoon. Mind you, Alex has no mattress. So when Piper lays down, she's like, ouch, how do you sleep on this thing? And Alex is like, not well. Which my brain immediately goes to Dorinda from New York Housewives and her, not well, bitch. Alex brushes Piper's hair back and tells her that she's really proud of her. She thinks it was really brave what she did. Really dumb, but really brave. Piper turns to Alex and says, you know, I don't think anyone has ever used that word to describe me, ever in the history of the universe. And Alex just brushes her hair back and says, I'm glad we have each other in here, kid. And Piper says, yeah, me too. I mean, I'd rather be on a beach in Tahiti, but you know, this is a close second. Piper is looking like she is falling for Alex all over again as she says, why do you always feel so inevitable to me? And Alex says, I heart you. And Piper's like, I heart you? Like, what is that? Is that I love you for pussies? Alex leans over and gives Piper a kiss, and they sit with that for a second before Piper says, I heart you too. That's when Nicky walks in on this little cuddle love session saying, hey, not lesbians. It's 11 o'clock. It's time for Larry's interview. Piper and Alex get up like, oh shit, as Alex reaches for the radio. Piper and Alex each take one headphone as they get ready to listen to Larry's interview. As the NPR host, Maury Kind, begins his show, we see a montage of the women in prison listening to the interview. So we know Piper and Alex are listening. We also see Nicky and Morello listening together. We see Miss Claudette listening. There's a radio going in the black dorms where Janae, Suzanne, and Poussey are all listening. We also see Mendez and Daya on a side quest during this little opening. First, Mendez went into the storage closet, and then Daya followed quickly behind him. We have a radio going in the kitchen where Red, Gina, and Norma are all listening. Mr. Healy is even listening in his office. So we jump back into Larry's interview right where we left off. Maury just asked him what are some of his favorite Piper prison stories. Say that 3 times fast. So Larry begins. He says, I think my favorite is one of the first. This insane girl, like actually insane, the kind of person who belongs in a psychiatric hospital, not a prison. She decides that Piper is going to be her wife. And then we cut to Piper's reaction in the prison and she's looking at Alex like, oh my God, what is he doing? And Alex is looking at Piper like, oh shit, this is a problem. But Larry continues. He says that this person, who we know is Suzanne, followed Piper around for days and wrote her this horrible poem. And as he says that, we cut over to Suzanne's reaction and she's crying because how hurtful is that? I feel really bad for Suzanne here. Maury Kind asks Larry if things like that make him fear for Piper's safety, to which Larry says, of course, absolutely. I know she can handle herself, but when you're dealing with unstable women, you have no idea of what they're actually capable of. Larry goes on and says, I mean, when your fiance says that she sleeps with one eye open because her roommate is rumored to be a murderer and might shiv her in her sleep, it's impossible not to be scared. And we see Miss Claudette's reaction to that. She sits up almost in disbelief of what she's hearing. Disbelief, confusion, anger, and hurt are written all over her face. And that hurt is really hard to see because it seems like it's hard for Miss Claudette to get close to people, and it looked like her and Piper were getting close. So for this to come between their relationship, it's pretty sad to see. Larry continues and says, I don't want to imply that they're all crazy and dangerous. Larry starts telling Maury Kind all about Janae and how she was going to be a track star and how she planned to train while she was in prison. But then they shut down the track because of the budget cuts. He also shares about how Lorna has been planning her wedding for months, just like everything is normal. He also goes on to say, but she's also sleeping with the hot lesbian junkie. But Nicky does not look at all upset with that title. Larry says that the cast of characters goes on and on. There's the Russian woman who runs the kitchen, totally terrifying, but she takes so much pride in feeding everyone. You really have to admire the way these women find meaning in their days. And we get to see Red's reaction to that. She looks almost impressed that this is the impression that she's left with Piper, and also pretty proud. Over in the storage closet, we see Mendez and Daya starting to get more familiar. When Daya realizes that Mendez has a condom, for just a split second, she looks disappointed because that's going to mess up their whole plan. But she fixes her face real quick and continues with the mission, even though it's not going to get her the result that she wanted. Although, I mean, she could still get pregnant with a condom. But I guess she wouldn't have anything to show for the rape, so yeah. I guess to stop now or insist that he doesn't use a condom would be a red flag, so she's got to just go through with it, which really sucks for her. Back in the interview with Larry, he's telling Maury that he always told Piper that he would never care if she had sex with someone else if it's just sex. Larry then goes on to say, but suppose theoretically that someone that she loved was in there with her, someone that she has history with, someone who could understand her life in there in a way that I'll never be able to. Someone like Alex. It would be devastating to think that that person could give her something that I can't. That would be way worse than just sex. It would be a betrayal. And with that, Piper takes the headphone out of her ear, stares straight ahead with tears in her eyes, and says, he knows. Back at the storage closet, we see Mendez coming out with something in his hand as he stuffs it in his pocket. I'm assuming that's the condom, so Daya has absolutely nothing to show for what just happened. Smart on Mendez, horrible for Daya. The next thing that we see is Daya walking quickly into the kitchen to see Red, looking visibly distressed as she tells Red he used a condom. Red's like, do you have it? But Daya has to tell her no. He took it with him. Red tells her, well, you're just gonna have to do it again. And Daya just starts to cry, saying that she doesn't want to, but she kind of feels like she has to. What a horrible mess she's in. Piper picks up her food in the cafeteria, and as she looks for somewhere to sit, she's noticing that a lot of eyes are on her. A lot of people have heard this interview, and a lot of people are not happy. Suzanne just looks at her with crossed arms, looking hurt and angry. So Piper sits down in a safe zone with Nicky, Alex, and Morello. That's when Tiffany walks in with her iconic hoodie. She's got it on. I noticed that whenever Tiffany's got her hoodie on, she's not well. She's usually coping with something or dealing with something. She's not in a happy place. So to see her walking in with her hoodie on, I can't even imagine how she's feeling coming out of Psych. Leanne gets up and goes right over to Tiffany to give her a hug, welcoming her back. And Tiffany looks like she really needed that hug. That's when Nicky looks up and says, oh fuck, because Miss Claudette has just entered the cafeteria and she's pissed. As Miss Claudette walks directly over to Piper, Piper stands up and says, I am so sorry. I had no idea that he was going to say those things. Miss Claudette says with tears in her eyes, is that what you think of me? It looks like Piper hurt Miss Claudette to her core. Really sad. Piper says nothing, and Miss Claudette just walks away. When that scene cuts, we're back at the phone banks with Piper. She's calling Larry again. This time he picks up the phone, all chipper, and says, so what'd you think? Like he didn't just blow up her whole prison life. Piper says, how did you know? He's like, know what? Piper says, I know that you know. So Larry says, I want to hear you say it. Tell me that you had sex with her. Piper says, Larry, don't do this. He says, are you still having sex with her? And Piper says, yes. Larry looks stunned, hurt, and angry on the other end of that phone as he tells Piper that her counselor, Mr. Healy, called to tell him that he was concerned about her behavior. Larry shares with Piper that Mr. Healy is the one who told him that Piper had to spend time in SHU for lesbian activity, which again was not in his place to say. That whole thing was absolutely ridiculous, and it's now having real life consequences on Piper's life. I think that's really messed up. Not cool, Mr. Healy. Piper says to Larry, so was this your revenge? Trying to get me killed? Larry says, wait, so you're the victim in all this? But Piper says, they're just people, Larry. They're just women who are trying to do their best, and you made them sound like they were... And he cuts her off and says, criminals? Piper's like, Jesus, who are you? Piper tells Larry that it's been horrible in here for her. With him not answering her phone calls, it's been really lonely for her in there. Larry says, oh, you're lonely? I just assumed that you were okay since you have Alex now. Do you love her? And Piper tries to say no, it's difficult. Like, she doesn't want to answer the question, but eventually she says, yes, she loves her. And so Larry starts to do this ugly cry face, and Piper starts to do this ugly cry face. Until Larry gets it together and says, with hate in his eyes, she named you, you know. She's the whole fucking reason you're in there. How does it feel to be in love with the woman who ruined our lives? And Piper is on the other end of the phone, crying, mouth wide open, just absolutely stunned. She eventually says to Larry, you lied to me? Larry responds with, I guess that makes us perfect for each other. Damn, Larry. I mean, I feel you, but damn. Piper tells him that she didn't mean for any of this to happen, but Larry tells her that he needs some time. Piper tells Larry, you have to let me fix this. But Larry says, I don't know if you can. Which brings us back to what Alex said earlier about understanding that you can't fix everything, Piper. Some things you can't. Larry hangs up the phone and Piper's left on the other end listening to the dial tone as we go to our orange screen indicating the end of the episode. So that's the episode. As a reminder, IMDb rated this episode an 8.4. Let me think about my rating for a moment. Well, first of all, if I could retitle this episode, I would call it The Interview, because to me, that's what stands out the most. That's what I remember. That whole sequence where Larry is talking about the women in the prison and we're seeing their live reactions to it was really, really good. Really sad, but really good. I also enjoyed that moment with Daya and the 3 prison moms at the table. It was nice to see them establish the 3 main prison moms right there at the beginning of the series. And although their plan is wrong in all kinds of ways, because they're literally about to mess up Mendez's life over something that he didn't do, and I know he's done plenty of horrible things, but this is technically something that is not true. So, you know, there's that gray morality area there. So while I don't really agree with their plan per se, it's nice to see them all come together to try to help Daya. I thought it was interesting for us to get a look at Psych and see Tiffany's time there. And I really like that moment between Suzanne and Piper where Suzanne is telling Piper about Psych and how different it is from SHU. We also get that key piece of information about why Suzanne is not in Psych and why she's here, because apparently her parents and her lawyer have a deal with the warden. I think that's going to be important to the story. Also, on this rewatch, I really enjoyed Vic's scene in that meeting with the guards. She was very strong in defending the safety of the women in that moment, and so I really liked that scene for her. It was also nice to see how the inmates react when people pass away in prison, how they all come together and support each other. Even if the administration doesn't show up for them, they show up for each other, and I think that's really nice to see. And obviously, that Alex backstory when she finds out that her mom has passed away hit me in a way that it's never really hit me before. I don't think I've seen that scene since my mom has passed, so that definitely took me some places that I did not mean to go today. So I apologize for oversharing, but that's my truth. I'm very sensitive. So with all that being said, I think I'm going to give this episode an 8.3, but that's just me. Don't forget to comment your favorite lines from the episode and let me know what your personal rating is for this week's episode. Mine again is an 8.3, but what do you guys think? I would love to hear yours. The next episode we will be rewatching is season 1, episode 12, titled Fool Me Once. The IMDb synopsis for that episode says, after discovering a series of sad truths, friendships change. Tiffany, Pennsatucky Doggett, is offended by Piper Chapman, and that leads them down dangerous roads. Also, Larry finally meets Piper after the radio show to discuss their future. We will also be getting a backstory next week from Tiffany, aka Pennsatucky, which I think is her first backstory, so I'm looking forward to that. I think her backstories really help us to understand her a lot better. So we'll be getting into that episode next time. I'll see y'all then. Thanks for hanging with me in Yadda Space. Just so you know, I've been having such a good time chit-chatting with you guys about Orange is the New Black. Self-promotion does not come easy, but I know it's a must to keep the podcast going. Every time you guys listen to the podcast, you like a post, you comment, or you share a post on social media, you're helping this little podcast to grow, and I can't thank you enough for the love and support. If you've been hanging out in Yadda Space for a while now and you're enjoying the Back to Litchfield podcast, please consider leaving the podcast a 5-star rating on your favorite podcast platform. Also, if you're able and want to go the extra mile, please consider checking out our Patreon. Joining the Prison Moms tier helps to literally keep the lights on for this little one-lady show, and it gives you early ad-free episodes, access to our exclusive Back to Litchfield chat right on Patreon, and honorary producer credits for the podcast. And be sure to follow us on your favorite social media apps. We are on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and now Blue Sky. Please follow those accounts for bonus content from the show, as well as updates about the podcast. And if ever you're searching for the pod, remember, it's just like the theme song says, Yadda Space with 2 E's. Thanks again for your continued support. It means so, so very much. I'll catch up with y'all next time here at Yadda Space.
Hey, welcome friends to Yadda Space. I'm Yadda here, let's set the pace. This is a rewatch podcast, so let's begin. Orange is the new black is where we dive in. Tasty's wisdom sets the tone. Jose's heart feels like home. Nicky's got that quick one fire. Morella's love of love lifts us higher. Spoiler